Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 115 of Stand Up. Joining me today on the show, comedian, radio show host, and activist Dean Obeidallah, emergency room physician from Iowa City, who's leading and co-founded a campaign to create public awareness about wearing a mask, Dr. Dave Krupp, and comedian Christian Finnegan joins me for another fascinating, heartfelt, vulnerable, hilarious, thoughtful conversation that we have every Friday. I'm Pete Dominic. Thank you for standing up with me right now. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Friday episode of Stand Up here each and every day. Daily, I'm pumping it out. 3 guests today. A lot of people talking about yesterday's episode 114, where Barry Ritholtz was great, as always, for almost an hour. And we had, for the first time on the podcast, Barksdale Hortonstein Jr., who is a public defender down in New Orleans. And people were very moved and inspired by the powerful things that he said in our conversation. I highly recommend that you listen to yesterday's episode, specifically that conversation with Barksdale. And yeah, that's his real name, by the way, Barksdale Hortonstein Jr. It's always fascinating to talk to a public defender, but this guy is in charge of mental health, and it's just amazing. And I'm going to keep having him on for sure, and people from his office. So I highly recommend you go back and listen to that if you haven't. Great one coming for you today. I have 3 great guests and conversations. The world seems to be on fire and crazy and unpredictable and uncertain. And we've got these riots happening in Minneapolis, and it's understandable why. Because you saw a man tortured by police officers to death. And it's brought out so much passion and rage and anguish, and I'm paying close attention to it. We'll be talking about it a lot next week with all the right people. Looking forward to those conversations, trying to get to the root of that problem. There's so much to say. We talk about it a little bit with both Dean Obeidallah and Christian Finnegan today. Also, the president has put out an executive order, which is somehow, I don't think anything's going to happen with it. These executive orders sometimes go nowhere. But he is basically directing Twitter to change their ways. And it's just so ironic, given the fact that for the last, I don't know how many years, conservatives and right-wing people screaming about censorship, and now the president of the United States doesn't like what people are saying on Twitter, or that they're fact-checking him. And so now he's going to shut them down. What are these same conservatives going to say, huh? What are you going to say now when your dear leader has decided to clamp down on the speech that he does not like, or the fact that he doesn't like that they're clamping down on his lies, which he continues every day? The president, as our friend S.E. Cup says, is not well. Lots of new subscribers this week to this podcast, and I don't want to belabor it and talk about it too much, but I do want to continue to thank you each and every day for subscribing, for paying for this podcast. I'm putting together myself all by my lonesome every day. I love doing it. It's a lot of work, and today I've got 3 guests, and I've been interviewing great people. It's been a great, great week that we've had here on the podcast, and I say we, I mean you and me. The people who listen to the show and myself, I get so much from you, so much insight, so many ideas, so much criticism even. So keep it coming and subscribe. If you haven't already, please consider it. It's so amazing to hear from people who I've never heard of ever before, contacting me and saying they've been listening to me for a long time, to the show for a long time. They've learned so much. They've become enlightened, and it's the conversation. It's the guests, and it's your insight. And I want to have a whole bunch of you on the show next week. I got some really good ideas. We'll do another Zoom or another video link. I'm trying to think of what else is better than Zoom, by the way. Are there better apps? Are there better programs than Zoom to get a whole bunch of people in? Let me know if you prefer something else, because I'm not a huge fan of Zoom. Anyway, let's get to the show. Today, joining me to start off, I got Dean Obeidallah. Then we'll talk with Dr. Krupp, who's out. This guy, Dr. Krupp, Dr. Dave, as he goes by, is a really interesting Renaissance man. There's apparently nothing this guy can't do, but he's an emergency room physician who is desperate to create awareness about why we should be wearing masks when we go out in public, at least for the next year, until we get either herd immunity or a vaccine, neither of which seems like they're going to be happening anytime soon. So we need to change our ways. We need to change our culture drastically and urgently. And Dr. Dave has a great public awareness campaign, maskofwellness.com. Check that out right now, maskofwellness.com. Let's get to my first conversation, my first guest, my old friend, Dean Obeidallah. You can hear him on Sirius XM, channel 127, 6 to 9 East. That's the Progress channel. And always happy to have a sit down with Dean. We always have a good conversation, and today's is no exception. Here it is. And there he is, my oldest, longest friend in New York, I think, because I met you the first time I did stand-up in like 95. Wow. Dean Obeidallah, welcome back.
Thank you, my friend. I didn't know that I was your longest, oldest, but I feel so bad. I should be so much better to you as a friend. I'm not the best friend. I'm so focused on my stuff. It's ridiculous.
That's is your relationship still going though?
I just sit at home alone every day. I actually, someone lives with me, my fiance. But yeah, it's just me.
Have you haven't even really invested in your own, the most important relationship in your life? You just focus on your own career?
I do. Like, I understand Trump because Trump is the worst version of me. He's like as selfish as you. He's so selfish, I notice it. That's how selfish he is. Because it's not like I'm selfish. I'm self-centered in that I want to do these things. And part of it, I hope, is redeeming, is that I feel like I'm trying to change things for the better. I feel like I'm an activist. And sometimes I am, and sometimes just for commercial reasons I have to do work and stuff like that. But, you know, it's funny, Hen, because you like Trump I don't like Trump because you understand Trump because you get him. And I go on some level a little bit, but his selfishness it's narcissistic. It's not at all beneficial to anyone.
There's definitely an element of anybody who does what we do, which has always been really similar, our tracks, you know, stand-up comedy, talking into a microphone or in front of a camera for any reason, is you want people to hear you and see you. That's how you make a living. That's how he has always made a living. People could talk about real estate investments, but how many other real estate tycoons, if you want to give them that credit, who name do you know? His whole thing was about getting attention and publicity, and he's been obviously really effective at that. And so there is a way for us to understand that. It's just ours is not nearly as evil and pernicious or pervasive.
No. Right, exactly. He's able to manipulate the media and get them to cover whatever he wants. Even on a day like today, we hit 100,000 Americans dead, 2.1 more million followed for unemployment, and Trump's talking about fighting Twitter, and the media just chases it. And it's almost disgusting to me to see. And it's more cable news media, frankly, than print media. Print media covers everything in the world. Cable news media, you see what their A block, what they're going to lead with. And it's going to be, today Trump tweeted, you know, last 2 days on my show, we are covering the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. That's my whole focus. Not Trump's tweets, not that garbage. I'm not going to get my programming schedule on my show based on what MS or CNN are covering. I'm just not going to do that. I cover things that impact people's lives. And I get frustrated with our media a great deal because of watching the sensationalism and how they chase whatever Trump throws out there. They just chase it. Like, don't you have any sense of decency whatsoever? Well, the answer is no.
Without, you know, I don't want to get you in trouble because I want your voice to continue to be invited on those shows and make the points that you make really well. But specifically, what's the kind of reporting that you would call out in terms of when the president is right now, he's being critical of Twitter and they're, you know, fact checking him. He's also, maybe this falls into the category of criticism of the media that you're describing, been calling Joe Scarborough a murderer every day. What is it that they do that's wrong on cable news, and what should they be doing when he is flooding the zone with craziness like this?
I wish they would focus more on policy and on issues that are affecting real lives of people, from the coronavirus, that impact, to the economic downturn. We're going into such a dire economic time that the media has not prepared people for. Instead, they've had Trump, because Trump's not preparing people for it. Yesterday, New York Times front page article, an avalanche of evictions are coming. This is something I've been talking about on my show, trying to ready for people, because Trump's not doing it, the media's not doing it, how bad this could get. And I don't know what the answer is for people if they have no more sources of income other than to push the members of Congress to extend unemployment past July. It ends at the end of July, and push for more stimulus and make sure the federal government is our safety net. But to me, it's the idea of having segments where it's like, you know, what Trump meant to say by that tweet is this. I don't care what, or the worst is the crawl. Trump angry today. I don't care what the baby's mental state is. Oh, he's colicky today. Why don't I put that? Trump is colicky today. I'm not being better than it. I'm like, I don't care. There are too many real issues affecting real people, right, especially during a depression. We have now 40 million Americans have filed for unemployment since March. Off the charts. We are going to have next Friday, we're going to get our unemployment numbers for May, and it's probably going to be 20%, 18, 20, 22%. This is horrific. People losing their health insurance. They're going to have foreclosures. There's a forbearance on foreclosures in the CARES Act, and some states have done it. Those end in about 3 months, and the state eviction forbearance ends. In fact, it already ended in Texas and Oklahoma, already begun it, and many red states didn't even do it. People are going to start losing where they live. These are issues to me that are much more real. And if they covered it, they would push our elected officials. People would push their elected officials, I hope, to address these issues as well. It's not like I'm not better than the tweet. Like, I'm intrigued sometimes by the tweets. Don't get me wrong. I write articles about them sometimes. There are some, but I try to make it more about policy or take a step back and talk about, you're seeing a picture of a guy who wants to be an authoritarian. Like when he goes after Joe Scarborough and alleges murder because he's a critic, and the next day says he wants to close down Twitter for doing what they do, subtly fact-checking. The bigger picture is authoritarian fascism. And that's a story. That's a real story to me, as opposed to him fighting with someone on Twitter.
I'm still stuck on this phrase, avalanche of evictions. And
the headline in the New York Times article, it's terrible.
Reminds me I have to do my live read for tiny houses and tents. Hey, folks, have you lost your home?
That's funny. Pete Dominic's House of Tents. If you want a big tent, you want a House of Tents. Pete Dominic, small tent, big tent.
The whole gimmick is
one for your dog.
The whole gimmick is I'm just selling tents and calling them houses, but they're just fucking tents.
But House of Tents is so much. I can see. Buy one, get a free one for your dog.
Tent community, cat. Start your own. They're great. Right. Who needs running water? Okay, so
and they come. We're great. Good.
No, do you want to keep riffing on this company that we're going to have to create?
I can see the commercial parody right now in my head. Hi, I'm Pete Dominic. Have you lost your house? All is not lost. I'm Pete Dominic. With little money down and small payments, you can have this beautiful tent or this one. Rain will only go through it certain days, like that kind of stuff. Like guaranteed for 3 to
people 5'7" and over cannot stand in this tent. So, with staying with media criticism. The other issue that I've heard from our mutual friend and guest, Glenn Kirshner, is that while, there's been a lot of attention on the public health nightmare that we're experiencing, the pandemic, that takes away from the attention that there should be on all of the law breaking that this administration is doing on a regular daily basis. Obviously, you're a former lawyer. You like to talk about these legal issues. You're an activist who's had the laws and regulations change on things. So what do you make of Glenn's criticism of the media, and what's your take on the fact that the Trump administration is doing a lot of terrible things and they're getting away with it because all we're focused on is not getting sick and dying?
Glenn Kirshner should be the next attorney general.
Agreed.
That's what he's a great guy, really smart, very passionate, and explains the issues in a way everyone gets. Like it's never, let me go Google that word. It's like he makes it accessible, which I really appreciate because he's extremely smart. He doesn't have to. Look, there are things where you're not, it's a story selection. If you're cable news media, you have a smaller landscape of what you can cover. I have a radio show for 3 hours a day. I can fit in more. I can have Glenn for 20 minutes and talk about a health issue.
Right.
I mean, yesterday I had on this woman, Sharon Block, who was on the National Labor Relations Board under Obama, to come on to tell people, how do you actually form a union? I really want people to know. I think we need more unions.
Awesome.
The leverage that employers are going to have over employees is always unequal. Now it's going to be extreme because of high unemployment. I try to come at my show and think about, how can I use my platform to make people smarter or to actually help them in their lives, whatever it might be about? Sometimes it's just informing them of issues. And Glenn's absolutely right. There are legal issues with Bill Barr, what he's doing and getting away with. We've never seen an attorney general, at least that I can think of, just so openly partisan, so blatantly partisan, just trying to please Trump at all costs. And we're going to see if there's going to be a normalcy after this, when Joe Biden gets in. Or are we going to demand our AG as Democrats, I'm a Democrat, to be just like Bill Barr? We're like, he's changed the norms. And that's what I wonder about Trump. Has he changed things in a way which we're not going to go back? In fact, we're going to be like, look what they did. We're doing that too now. And that's just, you're changing our norms in a bad way. And I'll tell you, when that happens, if we join them on the other side, they never go back. There's no one left to right the ship. Just go down this road of whoever's in power becomes more and more grabbing power and authoritarian. Even if they are authoritarian, they become more authoritarian. I don't like that.
Yeah, really disconcerting. I want to talk with you about what's been happening the last couple of weeks since the death of Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia, right? Where that happened, yes, to what we've seen now in Minnesota. And there's a woman who was killed by police in her own bedroom. And I'm forgetting all their names right now, which is the worst thing in the world. But everybody knows what the woman in Central Park did today. There has been a real rash of violence against black folks and black bodies and lives in the past few weeks. And as a result, we've seen protest and rioting, I guess you could call it, and vandalism last night in Minneapolis. And we're going to see a lot more of that. It's going to be a pretty rough summer, I think, for a lot of reasons. And, you know, everybody is juxtaposing the fact that white people can show up to the Capitol strapped with, you know, semi-automatic machine guns and camouflaged, and nobody really cares. But black people are protesting peacefully, and they're getting tear gas and so on. I'm so tired of that juxtaposition because I don't know where it gets us, Dean, but it is the truth in American life and American protest. Where do we go from here? It seems to be getting worse. And thank goodness for camera phones.
I agree with you. And apparently black lives only matter if it's videotaped. Because if it was not videotaped, we would never have seen this, right, and they would have told their story, and people would have discounted that or went to their partisan sides, while more progressive people would have listened to the people of color and the more Trump type of people. Look, we've been having this conversation for 2 days on my show about how do we not have this conversation again in a week and in 2 weeks and 3 weeks. And I had African-American people who called the show and share their vision, and I'll share here what their solutions were. And it's really many-fold. I mean, the idea of having more black people getting involved in the police force, getting involved in positions of power as chief of police, as elected officials, using the power, the economic power of the black community to have an impact, to try to change things, to have our elected officials speak out. Their list is the list that I go to. For me, I'm not white, but I'm not black. My experience as a Muslim American, being of Arab heritage, and also being half Italian, his own things, is not the white experience. It's not the black experience. It's, with the case in Central Park, you had the man there, Christian Cooper, and then you had George Floyd in Minneapolis. Christian Cooper went to Harvard. George Floyd was a bouncer at a restaurant. Both treated the same because they were black, and the people that saw them. The case of Amy Cooper, who saw him just for his blackness, and use that against him, say, I'm calling the cops, and accuse an African-American man. When she said African-American, he was white. You think she would have said, and there's a white guy bothering me? No, that's where her racism came out. But George Floyd, it was horrific what we saw. Horrific. And what is Trump? One tweet yesterday at 6 o'clock, sort of buried. Meanwhile, 20 tweets today, literally about Michael Flynn again, Obamagate, surveillance. Trump, when he does one tweet, that's someone writing for it. And that comes from the top. When black men took a knee to protest police abuse, Donald Trump called them sons of bitches and said they should be fired. That's his exact word. When a white man takes a knee on a black man's throat, he gets one tweet at 6 o'clock at night and no retweets, no more calling for nothing. And this is a message. So again, Donald Trump has made this a partisan issue. I've seen some of his supporters online going against, calling out what's going on. And in Minnesota, if you don't understand, that's one thing, but they're making it the way that people on the right do. Use the worst examples of any community to define that entire community, and then try to put policies in place based on this caricature. They do it to the Muslim community all the time. This is my entire existence in America, post 9/11, being defined by the worst in our community, and then they try to define us by that. They're taking a step back and understanding the rage of African Americans. And yesterday I read the quote on my show from James Baldwin from decades ago, where he said, he used the term Negro because that was at the time what it was used. But the idea of if you're a Negro and if you're even relatively conscious, you're in a constant state of rage. I said that yesterday. When you see what's going on, if your people have been killed without any recourse whatsoever, without justice, for decade after decade through the history of this nation, from enshrined in the original Constitution, had the Fugitive Slave Clause. To this day, you're still fighting these same battles for simple equality so your life matters. I don't condone looting or burning down the store, but I get how it's pent up in the sense that their lives really don't matter. And this is all they've got to try to bring attention to their situation. It's heartbreaking. I mean, it's not something, that's where I'm not black. It's not, we don't have Muslims being killed weekly by the police or have the police called on us every few weeks. That happens at certain times. And of course, the history of black Americans is unique to our society.
You know, I feel like it's really helpful for me to follow and talk with and have in my life a lot of black commentators and analysts, many of which people's name would recognize, because honestly, just seeing their tweets, you talk about the rage, but I obviously agree with that, and I see that, but I also see a lot of anguish from honest, vulnerable, mind-blowingly intelligent black people on Twitter. Anguish. And I feel like it's important that white people see it and feel it if they can. You know, you can never really, but try to internalize that anguish and that rage, because it's not, the solution isn't for black people. The root of the problem is in white supremacy and white people. And if we don't feel it, if we don't see it, because it's easy to look away because we're so segregated, and if we don't feel it, then we're not going to have any change. And the change that needs to happen, more than anything else, it wouldn't solve all the problems, not even remotely close, would be law enforcement reform, police reform. Dean, we've seen some minor reforms around the edges, but I mean, that's a tough thing to do, because the police departments, the PBAs, they have a tremendous amount of power and influence, not only with Republicans, but with Democrats, especially at the local and state. You can never be critical of police, much less change the rules for police. How much do you think law enforcement reform is a good answer and solution to what we're seeing?
Well, I think that's part of the issue.
It's not going to solve the Karen issue.
Right.
And just everyday racism.
But that's the bigger point. And that's the point when, African-American callers call my show. And I would prefer to tell you what they tell me than tell you as an off-white guy. I can give you my intellectual solutions. What they'll talk about is the police represent society. That's all they are. They're a microcosm of our society where white supremacy is ingrained in it. That's part of it. The police are trained to de-escalate, but how come they escalate when it's someone who's black? And when a white guy with an AR-15 screams in their face, they de-escalate. That is where the bias comes in our society and who they are. So training, yes. In New Jersey, Governor Murphy signed a law, I think it was last year, where if there's shootings in a municipality by the police, it's no longer investigated by the local police. It'll go to, I believe, the state AG. That's the way it's going to go, or the county prosecutor. But it's definitely not going to have the investigation led by the police force or the local prosecutor in that town. That's a good move. Having third-party eyes look at it. The DOJ, Donald Trump tweets last night, I had the FBI and DOJ looking into the killing in Minneapolis. First of all, they were there since the day before, but having Bill Barr's DOJ investigate means nothing except there are career prosecutors, and perhaps they're going to do the right thing. That's what I have to hope. I think that's partly what you need. I think it's societal. Look, it is so deep and ingrained in our society, the white supremacy, on the subtlest little things, from our TV shows to our movies to the way people treat each other to someone at the park. How do you change the course of water? I mean, how do you change the composition? It's like water. It's everywhere. Racism. I think you do it incrementally. Yeah. And I have African-American people call, they're almost in tears.
Yeah, for sure.
These stories.
Oh, yeah.
It goes from anguish, as you said, to rage. I prefer the rage because then I think maybe you'll get more engaged. I understand the anguish. I certainly get it. And Pete, you mentioned white people. Pre 9/11, I was white. I was sincerely a white guy. I lived my whole life as a white guy. I identified as a white guy. When these things happened, I was a liberal guy. I was involved. I had been a lawyer, and then I had just quit to become a comedian, worked at SNL. When issues of the race came up, I noticed them. I had compassion and empathy, but I probably didn't talk about them much. As a minority now in the post 9/11 world, especially the last 7 or 8 years, I feel it. It's not something, I don't know if white people feel it. You might, not saying you don't. But when I see the suffering of other people of color, other minorities, it's visceral for me. It's no longer intellectual. I get upset. I get moved to tears. I get enraged by it. So my whole view has changed. And I know there are white people watching what happened in Minneapolis with the Target and the looting, and they're dismissing it. Well, look what's going on. It's just an excuse for crime. We're not seeing the big picture of what actually is going on, what led to that. And perhaps if you understood that, we wouldn't get to the looting.
I don't think
they arrested these cops. They should have just arrested these cops. Even the mayor, Jacob Fry, called for the cop yesterday. Young white guy, the mayor. He called for the cops to be arrested yesterday. They should be arrested.
We have audio here at Stand Up with Pete Dominic of the moment you told your parents you were going to quit being a lawyer to become a comedian. Do you want to have to live through that raw audio again?
If you've got the audio, why not?
All right.
What is it?
Oh, all of a sudden it won't play. Of course, right when I go to air. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Dean, no. That's wow. Your mom sounds really old.
My mom more higher. He's like, Dean, what are you doing? What's going on? Why do you want to kill your parents? With my parents, it was a little easier because it wasn't like I was dropping out of law school to do it. I already had a law degree, already had passed the bar, and was practicing law. So they felt like it was a phase. And they're like, okay, you could always go back to being a lawyer, which is true. And that was actually my selling point then.
Yeah.
Like, Mom and Dad, I got to do this, but I already have a law degree. It's not like I'm dropping out or anything. I'm going to quit law, work for a couple of years. We'll see what happens. I'm still waiting to see how it works out.
That's a great safety net to have. When I lost my job at Sirius, I couldn't fall back on my associate's degree in humanities.
That's true. But I would have sued SiriusXM because I'm a lawyer. Boom, we're in court.
Sued them.
I would have. That's I'm just any day. I'm just waiting. I'm just staring at the executive. You want to go to court? All right, I'm there. Just say something. I'm the only Muslim working at SiriusXM.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay. Well, actually, Nina, who works on my show, is the other. I'm the only host.
I think it's weird that you filed a lawsuit against me for helping you get that job. What's that all about? Can you drop that for God's sake?
I'm going to drop it. And I got to drop John Fugelsang from the lawsuit as well. There's no need to add him, but I just for fun, I thought it was kind of nice to suck him into the whole thing.
I wanted to ask you, with the time we have remaining, about the election and specifically
what election?
The divide in the Democratic Party. How have you, as a host on SiriusXM Progress, the progressive, the liberal channel, handled the divide in the Democratic Party? Because I imagine as a host, you don't want to lose anybody. You want to keep people listening to the show and caring about the issues that we all care about and generally agree on some of the problems, much less some of the solutions, the idea of progressives in general. How concerned are you about the divide? How would you articulate the divide in the progressive movement? I don't want to articulate it myself. Where do you think that we are at? How concerned are you about, before we get to the hijinks that will be at play and all the concerns about democracy and voting and so on, before we get to that, what about that divide? Where are we at? You would know better than most, at least.
The divide, it's there. It's more on the fringes, because even like guys like Cenk Uygur, who, while I think he supported Hillary ultimately in 2016, he tweeted over the weekend about you leftist idiots, saying to them, if you're waiting for 4 more years of Trump and think somehow you're going to jump up and control everything, you're out of your mind. And he's a leftist. He's as liberal as they come. So I think there's a pragmatism because Trump is so bad. There'll be some some call up and say, you've got to give me a reason to vote for Joe Biden, not just against Donald Trump. And I go, I have surrogates on from Biden. I play clips of Biden. I do my best to try to sell him. But I think this is a negative partisan election. This is one. It's not measuring enthusiasm for Joe Biden. It's measuring enthusiasm to defeat Donald Trump. And that's where the enthusiasm really lies. And I think Joe Biden gets that. He even said he's a placeholder. He used that term a few weeks ago. And they go, what do you mean by that? He got it. It's not, he's the guy who's going to right the ship. And I don't know if he'll run for re-election at all. And I would not be surprised if he's not going to, but he can't say that now.
I mean, mainly because he's ancient.
But possibly, or perhaps he's done his job. I mean,
yeah,
we'll see where he is at 82, 83.
Well, but what you're saying, just so what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing this a lot, it seems to be a strange but effective strategy is Donald Trump is so bad every day and so evil and horrible every day that it doesn't really make a lot of sense for Joe Biden to make a lot of noise about much of anything. Good ideas, solutions to problems. Just don't draw any attention away from this guy shitting his pants publicly all day, every day, Donald Trump, and disgracing people all day, every day. Keep the attention, because there's far more to be gained in that the vile hatred for Donald Trump than there is in any kind of enthusiasm or support for Joe Biden. How did I do? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
I think, look, on some level, there's an adage, don't catch a falling knife. It usually has to do with the stock market, but you don't catch a falling knife. Trump he's his own worst enemy. We see that. I do think, though, and I just had a Biden surrogate on 2 days ago, Congressman Tim Ryan. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, I know Tim.
And he came on as a surrogate. And I said to him, what are we going to see? We have a depression. This is a time for Joe Biden to come out with FDR-style policies. And he promised that the Biden campaign is working on big, bold, that was his words, big, bold policies. Joe Biden can't go wrong in this climate to come out with big, bold policies. I think he should. They can go with socialist all he wants. Those labels mean nothing when someone can't pay their rent or about to get evicted or have their car repossessed. They just want help. I think that's what Biden can talk about that all day and talk about Donald Trump just being horrific and saying, look at the guy I'm running against. He's horrible. And I think that's a big part of the election. Joe Biden's not going to become the progressive champion, poster child that inspired people who love Bernie. But Trump is so bad. And look, the other thing is, I'll tell you, I had Faz Shakir on, who was Bernie's campaign manager 2 weeks ago. Yep. That joint task force they're doing with the Bernie and the Biden people, bringing them together to talk about policy issues.
I don't know about that.
AOC is involved. Yeah. It's all behind. It's getting some press, but it's really behind the scenes. AOC is a part of it. You've got key people from Biden's campaign and Bernie's who are there on policy task force, and they're going to come together and cobble together a Democratic platform that both can agree to. They didn't do that after Hillary won in 2016 because, as I asked Faiz why, he said the time was too short because that ran right to the end almost, that fight. They're doing everything they can to make up for the mistakes of last time of not bringing everybody in. I think we're going to go in very unified. You're going to lose some people who are purists. I don't have the privilege. I wrote an article for CNN over the weekend, and libertarians got so upset with me. I was not attacking their candidate. In fact, I said nothing bad about her, except for the fact I don't have the privilege to even contemplate a third party, nor do any minority community in this country where Donald Trump's taken a shot at and demonized us and discriminated against us and inspired hate crimes. I don't have that privilege. Good luck with your privilege. I'm not mocking you for having it. I wish I had it. I don't have it. Yep. So I'm not, and they get all upset. If you're going to vote third party, what can I say? But if you maybe for a second care about those minority communities out there, I hope that you'll join in getting rid of Trump. And then we're going to push Biden to be more progressive. That's the thing. Yeah. I think the Democratic rank and file is not ready for. That's going to happen. They're not ready for that. They're going to think we're attacking him. We're going to be just pushing him a lot. Have you looked at, and how much have you analyzed and thought about, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here and talking about kind of the election and the horse race, but when you look at how the economy is cratering and you see where the pandemic has been the worst, people will look at the blue states and say that's where most people are getting sick and dying. People will say it's disproportionately people of color, disproportionately older people and poor people in general, a lot of white people who are low income as well. Who have to go to work to make ends meet and they get sick at work and so on. But if you looked at the map, the electoral map, and looked at the states that are the, quote, battleground states, the swing states that have to be won, that he won last time, that Biden would need to win this time, match up the economies in those states, the pandemic in those states, and wonder, here's my question, if you're a hardcore Trump supporter, does that fever break given that you've lost your job and maybe gotten sick or lost somebody as a result of the pandemic in Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania? That's the big question. Can you move some Trump supporters? Or more importantly, to me, it's not about moving Trump supporters. I honestly don't care what they do. It's about getting our base and people in the middle and people who didn't vote last time, who would have voted for Hillary, but didn't vote because they thought she was going to win no matter what, and they didn't like her. Getting those people out. And I think the 2018 midterm election gives you a roadmap for victory, and that not only flipping 40 seats, but the fact is the Democrats won in raw votes the midterm in the biggest margin of history in the midterm by 10 million votes. And we only beat Trump by 3 million, in 2016. I think if we come out big, we win big. The key states right now, the polling, we're 5 months out. I mean, it is a little bit instructive now. It's not, we don't know where the economy is going to be, but there's other states. It's going to be bad. It's not. You don't know what it's going to be. But the question isn't, is it going to bounce back? Right. I feel like the question is, how bad is it going to be? And the other question is, how bad is the pandemic going to be on November 3rd? True. And also for Trump, if you're Trump's team, this big number is going to come out next Friday, maybe 20% unemployment. By October, you might be down to 12% unemployment, which is still horrible over Great Recession numbers, but so much better. And Trump will be like, stick with me. Look how much I brought down the unemployment. That's where his selling point's going to have to be on the economy. But don't forget, Ohio may or may not be in play. It's kind of really trended red a lot. But North Carolina looks like it's in play. Arizona definitely is going to be in play. Michigan, we're doing pretty well. I think we're going to win that pretty well. Pennsylvania, I think Democrats will. I think Wisconsin's going to be a challenge.
Crazy.
It's winnable, but
what a weird state.
North Carolina, I know it is. They just they elected a Democratic governor in 2018, but razor thin margin there,
and then took away all his power. The Republicans,
and they did the same thing in North Carolina.
How much do you pay attention? I mean, you're an activist yourself, and I wonder how much. I like to consider myself, but I don't really do much an activist. But how much do you think the strategies that worked in the 2018 midterm election to create that blue wave and take back the House are going to be effective? Because I feel like political activists are just as challenged as anybody else to get the message out, given the pandemic, with social distancing, all of the tactics that we need to get people elected, and all of the attention. The vacuum is really the issue, I think. It's all about the COVID-19 and the pandemic, and not necessarily about anything that these state district races need to be heard. How are you seeing activists adapt to helping their candidates get elected during this time where we still have a number of primaries too?
Well, people are using, obviously, you have to go online. You're doing email, social media. But I think in the big election 2020, because my focus is on Trump and then winning the Senate, we have a secret weapon that's going to help us in 2020.
Is it John Fugel saying?
No, not John Fugel saying. Oh. It's Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump every day makes progressives and those who don't like him, even the Rick Wilsons and those Republicans who have left him, angry. He makes us angry every single day. And what I say on my show every day now is stay angry. And the reason being, exit polls showed in wave elections, the emotion that of people who out in exit polls in these big wave elections wasn't like, I came here to vote because I'm so happy with the candidate, or I love this candidate, or it's about hope for change. The word was anger. That was the exact word in the exit poll asked about their emotional state. Anger wins big elections. If we stay angry, that's why Trump tries to keep his base angry. He gets that too. There are more of us. Every day Trump keeps us angry, that's better for us. And I tell people, stay angry. That's how we defeat Trump. And he makes it easier and easier every day to do that very thing.
Dean Obeidallah, everybody. Listen to him on SiriusXM Progress every night, 6 to 9 East, channel 127. Follow him on Twitter. Read him at CNN and the Daily Beast. Visit him and his apartment on the upper something side.
I'm not telling you. Let's take some phone calls.
Let's go to the phones. Mike.
Trucker Steve wants to say hi.
Tell everybody I said hi.
I will. Trucker Steve calls sometimes.
Does he really?
Yeah, he does. He does call. There's all different callers, but he's the only one that sort of carry over. And him and like one other. There's nobody else. Everyone else is new now of the callers I used to have from Insight. So, Pete, looks like you're doing well. I mean, the Old Spice commercials you're doing are great.
Thank you.
And
yeah,
you got that going on. You're captain.
Those are paying well.
So I wish you the best with this room that you live in now.
Small room, nobody comes to visit, but at least I have an internet connection and a pot, literally a pot to piss in.
And next week, House of Tents.
House of Tents, and I hope that you'll promote that. I know it's not your favorite product, but
I'm doing live reads every night. You don't have to pay me.
With the avalanche,
House of Tents of Pete Dominic.
With the avalanche of evictions, now is the time to get a tent.
I agree with you.
Making homelessness funny. Dean, thank you. Appreciate it, buddy.
Bye. Thank you. I'm leaving now before my career's over. Bye-bye.
Too late. He really actually hung up right there. I don't even think he heard my too late. Love Dean. Love that conversation. Follow him on Twitter at Dean Obeidallah. Listen to him on SiriusXM Progress if you're a subscriber to SiriusXM still, or if you haven't abandoned that after they let me go. I wish them no ill will, or Dean or John, both of which I helped get those jobs and both of which still have them. But the strange thing now is I'm no longer envious of that. There's a lot of really good things in my life now. And I have struggled quite a bit over the past 5 months after I lost that gig. And we still are in many different ways financially and in terms of health insurance. And both our daughters have had some minor health issues, scoliosis, and almost broken arm. And it's a nightmare dealing with health insurance. But I love the freedom that I have now in my life. I love working for myself. I love being able to go outside anytime I want, even and including during the winter. So there's a lot of good things in my life right now. But honestly, and most importantly, it's you, the paid subscriber of this show, which is allowing me to do it now daily. And I'm having amazing time. I'm learning so much from the guests and having such a great time talking to them and then talking to you as well. I've gotten so many new friends out of this. I have enjoyed all of my conversations with you privately and here on the podcast and look forward to talking with more of you. Sign up for a paid subscription right now if you haven't at patreon.com/Pete Dominick or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Also in the show notes here, and I promise you I'm going to throw to my next conversation with Dr. Dave Krupp in a second here. Also, you can now look at the show notes and whether it is on the Patreon app or whatever podcast app you're listening to and see what time each interview starts. So Dean Obeidallah starts a few minutes in, and then about 40 minutes later, I talk with Dr. Dave Krupp. Anyway, I don't know because I'm putting it together right now, but you'll see it on the show notes. And so if you want to skip one conversation to go to the other, that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to give you a number of different ideas and issues and people that you can listen to. You like this one, you don't like this one as much, you have time to listen to this one, you want to get to that one first. It'll be easier now. You can fast forward and go right to the time that the interview starts. That was a listener suggestion, and I took it. It was a great one. Hopefully you appreciate it. And let's get to my conversation right now with Dave Krupp. Dave comes highly recommended to me from my friend Mark Nolte, who is a longtime listener and subscriber, lives out in Iowa City, one of the best guys I know. Mark said, you really should have this guy on. He's got this great campaign called maskofwellness.com, and he's an ER physician in an Iowa City hospital, and he's the co-founder of this organization, which is basically a public awareness campaign, and I hope to try to get them as much attention as possible, and I highly recommend that you check it out, maskofwellness.com, share the videos, watch the videos, and share them, and listen to this guy. He's real smart. I think you're going to love this conversation right now. There we go. There he is, Dr. David Krupp, out in Iowa City, and I'm very happy to have you joining me. You come highly recommended from a longtime listener and a guy who's become a good friend and brother, like a brother to me, Mark Nolte. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Krupp.
Happy to be here. Really happy to be here.
You are an emergency room physician in Iowa City, and Iowa City, for people who don't know, is a college town, and with it, all of the things that you would expect about a college town. Is that fair to say? And tell me more about Iowa City.
Iowa City is actually like one of the best places to live, top 10 for medium-sized cities, just because, you know, with a university, it brings some culture, but yet bringing culture brings controversy and allowance of perspectives. So I like that idea because we all need our perspectives, but because there's no absolute truth often.
Oh, wow. Deep answer. Very thoughtful. You grew up in Illinois?
Yeah, Southern Illinois, right by a St. Louis town called Belleville, a beer drinking, fist fighting kind of town that was kind of interesting to grow up into, and then to come into here and grow in the process. But I was a child of a small business owner, so I get some of the impact this has upon society, on the small businesses, and upon the people.
Yeah, you have a very wide perspective, and sounds like you've lived a number of lives and lived in different communities. And obviously, being an ER physician, you probably have treated a lot of people who've been beer drinking and in fist fights. But every time I talk to an ER physician, I've got a great friend and subscriber to the show named Addison, and I love to just ask them and you about that job. Why would you want to be an ER physician? You know, everybody's now watching Grey's Anatomy again. It's available on Netflix. My daughters have watched like every episode, which I'm not really happy about. I know it's not like Grey's Anatomy, and I know that there's a lot of burnout, a lot of mental anguish that it's really important to deal with. Why would you want to do this? I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and so also a little ADHD goes well for something like this. But you have the ability to fix people. There's so many ways in medicine you just try and maintain, but in emergency medicine, you can fix a situation often,
or at least plant the seeds to bring about the change that's necessary.
Is there anything typical? Is there a typical day rather in the ER in Iowa City?
No, that's the thing. Every week you come across something you've never seen before, or even considered, or some approach to it that has to keep you on your toes.
And as a result of that, you are also a really curious, smart guy who's got a thread of invention in your mind, and you've come up with a number of different ideas, which of course brings us to why you're here to talk about Mask of Wellness, which I've already mentioned before we started here, Dave. But can you, before we recorded, can you hold up this device that you've just invented as a result of some of the challenging situations you guys are in an ER?
Yes, one of the things on the side, but a side note, is just created something to remove the threat. And so a little loud right now, but it's just a threat reduction device where you pop over somebody's head and hook it to wall suction through a viral filter. So in essence, you don't need PPE as much. You need to take the bullet away from the threat. You don't need to put defensive armor. So that's one of the things, along with a scalp closure tool so kids don't have to get shots in their head, and a few other little inventions. So just more, you often just look for solutions. We're Americans. That's just what we do.
So in this case, this campaign that you started, this movement that you started, Mask of Wellness, and everybody should check this out and watch the videos that Dr. Krupp has made, and maskofwellness.com. Do I have it right?
Yes, you got it.
This is less of an invention, of a device, and more an invention of an idea or movement. Tell me about what you're trying to do here.
I guess just kind of boilerplate a little bit, and some of it's on the website, but really, as an emergency doc of 20 years, I've just become too intimate with the profound and multifaceted impact this pandemic has upon wellness, and seeing it's not just the physical, it's the social, the emotional, the economic toll that it's taken. And I'm seeing a lot of patients that this has impact upon in all those realms. So I ended up hooking up with a pharmacist and telling him my dream about how to bring about change that we'll get into. And then a small group of volunteers, just 7 of us, have been doing this. And we put together this pretty exciting process method that's going to benefit America. So Mask of Wellness basically is a movement to promote COVID conscious businesses. And that's the concept, to be COVID conscious in these businesses. So we help support them for free with a positive, empowered self-choice method to improve the health and the wealth of communities through 3 simple, basic, impactful measures. And so all it takes is if all the employees wear masks in the public places. And then second is hygiene. We attend to our personal, surface, and distancing hygiene. Then lastly is daily health certification. If you're sick, keep your butt home. Don't go to work, and make sure the boss is okay with that. So just 3 simple things: masks, hygiene, and health. And through that, we decided that consumers have fear right now, so they're not going to businesses, and these businesses are struggling. So consumers will seek out COVID conscious businesses. In turn, will benefit the health, the wealth, and the wellness of individuals and businesses in all of our communities. Because through these steps, we have an opportunity to make a difference for the wellness of America.
What you're trying to do, though, COVID conscious business, is there's an issue with people wanting to go to the store, to a doctor's visit, get their haircut, because walking into that building, walking into that establishment means walking into an enclosed place where the monster might be, and the monster might get us. What you are trying to say is it sounds like we need to continue living, and we can continue living, but we need to make some subtle changes in the ways that we socialize physically with other people, so that we can keep going to businesses, so that we can have our lives. That's what I'm hearing. That the COVID conscious businesses, is you're trying to campaign to get businesses to follow these rules so that people could get back to some semblance of normal. Is that right?
Absolutely. So does it completely remove risk? No, we can't completely remove risk, but it's more harm reduction. So when we drive a car, we are taking a risk every time we drive a car, but I pop a seatbelt on. I got an airbag that's going to deploy, and there's other testing to make sure. So through these harm reduction maneuvers, we have the possibility to go out and mitigate risk. Or, it's the best thing. If I sit at home and don't drive a car, I'm not going to get in a crash. I'm safe. that is the safest thing, is to stay home. But for those that want to go out, they're going to prefer to choose a COVID conscious business.
Well, you're uniquely prepared to qualified. You're uniquely qualified to answer the question about if someone had done this or if someone had worn that, they wouldn't be in my ER right now. They wouldn't be injured. They wouldn't be dead. You talk about the analogy of the seatbelt to, say that there's zero risk. I would, throw the helmet in there for bikes and for motorcycles. But what you're saying is, when people come into your ER, how often do you say, if only they had taken this precaution, if only they had known that this was going to happen when they put a pickle in their ass? I mean, I ask all ER physicians how many vegetables you've seen jammed in orifices that you've had to get out and be like, don't worry, it's okay. You'd be also the therapist. Anyway, sorry to digress. How much do you see those things and say, if only they had tried this or worn that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the concept of there's no such thing as an accident. We only have preventable injuries, is the phrase. And so there's so many methods, because you don't want to see somebody's brain. Just knowing if they had a helmet on, they'd be good. And that, transitions over to this concept for the COVID conscious businesses. If these steps were taken, then the disease would not spread, because I am seeing the impact upon them.
If these steps were taken, the disease would not spread. You're asking people to take some minor precautions, but some folks just don't want to change. They see it as a threat to their freedom and liberty even. What would you say to the people who don't want to wear a mask, wash their hands, and socially distance? Because don't tell me what to do. This is my freedom. This is America.
Yeah. And I get that. We cannot have freedom without responsibility. For instance, the First Amendment, I have freedom of speech, but I cannot walk into a crowded movie theater and say, fire. That is inappropriate. It's not responsible. I have the right to carry a gun. It's really the Bill of Rights we speak about with freedom. And so I have the right to have a weapon, but I can't walk around shooting that gun in the air. The chance of it hitting anybody is pretty small, but there's a chance. So freedom cannot be without responsibility. And thus, that's why I feel the need for masks personally. But I would hope that those who are anti-maskers at least consider the other perspectives, as opposed to using confirmation bias and implicit bias and all these other methods they use to seek out to support their own view. But that's where we realize when the government comes down and makes the rule, people are going to rebel. But if we can at least get them to have a positive, empowered, grassroots self-choice with it and keep an open mind to the concept, that's where change can happen.
You're asking people, listen, just do this because it's the right thing. Do it because it'll protect you and other people. Don't do it because anyone is telling you to. Don't do it because the government is mandating it. Obviously, I agree with you. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here because there are these, as you call them, anti-maskers. I haven't heard that phrase, but I'm sure it's popular or will be. And they seem mostly young, and I don't want to put any kind of label on them. I don't think I can. But what have you seen change that behavior? I've seen videos of them being shamed and kicked out of places, but too often, they come back and shoot people. I mean, it's gotten violent. So I don't know what will work, but have you seen any kind of, you have this great campaign and it's got an educational component, this public awareness campaign, but have you seen anything that really works on the anti-masker?
Complex answer because they're all unique in their own choices.
Sure.
But I think as more of the public starts wearing a mask, then as we're social animals, we're going to start having more awareness and more desire to do that. But again, also, people are influenced by social media as by commercials, and we're starting to see a little bit more in the commercials. Mr. Saban recently came out and saying, hey, wear a mask. So he's going to have influence upon somebody. We need some of these influencers. For instance, Ford, big deal that their commercials now they're putting in little clips of somebody wearing a mask. And there's potential commercials. We can use the social advertising world can have influence upon individuals also if done right.
I feel like that this pandemic, we feel like it's going to end. and we'll have lived through a nightmare, and it will be over, and we'll get back to some semblance of normal, and we'll be okay. But when you're starting your campaign now, when the curve has been flattened, we're on the downside, there's a lot of concern that it'll come back. But let me just understand what you think, Dr. Krupp, about the future here, because you didn't start this campaign and spend all this time to work on something that is unnecessary. This is our new normal, it sounds like, what you're saying. People are going to need to be wearing masks for a long time. Maybe forever, because this thing could never go away. We hear about vaccines and treatments and so on. But all of the three things that you're asking people to do, simple measures, hygiene, distancing, wearing a mask, and so on, is this going to be forever? What do you think in terms of the timeline that these behaviors will be necessary in public for?
Yeah, it's tough to say depending on how the vaccine roll goes, but we're looking at 2021 before a vaccine comes about, or before that we have herd immunity at some point in time. And so tough to predict whether this will be going on for years. There is the possibility, depending on viral processes that allow for different variations, just as influenza has different ways that it'll continue for years. So there's the possibility. Not my desire, but unquestionably, we're looking at least 9, 10, 12 months of this process.
So this is, you'd like to see people practicing these behaviors that the Mask of Wellness movement is highlighting for the next year.
Yeah, my goal is to go out of business. And this is not even business. We're looking to be cost neutral. This is all out of pocket and all volunteer time from the 7 of us. But my goal is that we are not needed because this pandemic ends and the process ends. So I'm one of the few businesses that want to go out of business.
You make a great case in terms of the science behind droplets and how the virus spreads on the videos that you've posted and made yourself. They're really well done. I mean, high production value, sir. I'm very impressed at ER Doctor. What can't you do, by the way? Seriously, do you have carpentry skills?
Yeah, I pretty much did. I used to actually be in construction and be a roofer and all those other variables, as well as to help adults with developmental disabilities before med school.
Oh, wow. What is the home repair that you will not do?
I don't like plumbing because when it goes bad, it goes bad, but I'll do everything else.
Can you play an instrument?
Yeah, several.
Do you speak other languages?
Not well.
Can you fly a plane?
I've flown my grandpa's plane before.
Son of a bitch.
Will I land it? No.
That's not what I asked. No. That's not what I asked. Okay, I give up. What do you cook well? Do you make good food?
I think so. After I tweaked my neck doing some taekwondo kind of MMA stuff and blew a disc and almost went paralyzed, couldn't do anything. So I learned how to cook well. Oh my gosh.
We'll have to save that story for another time.
Yeah,
anyway.
Doing that and rock climbing and rock falling and being in the hospital and almost losing my leg. Yeah. So,
oh my God. Who are you? What kind of a renaissance? What are you bad at? Is there anything that you've ever tried and failed miserably?
You can ask my wife or my kids what I'm bad at.
All right. I'm sure they have plenty of answers. All right. I'm sure somewhere there's a weakness. Dr. Krupp, you're saying that I was saying that the production value is great, but my question is, how do you explain now on a podcast, if possible, or on a video, like the science behind this, which is why we need to practice these 3 steps when we go into businesses? How do you explain it on radio without the aid of those visual tools that you have?
Yes. And so, for me, if you start thinking about this virus as a little blue spaceship, then it makes so much more sense. We have to put visualization to it. Otherwise, it's this nebulous threat that we feel threatened by. And with that, so if this virus is a little blue spaceship, you just think about it when I'm talking. And that NIH study showed it, that stay healthy. You just look up stay healthy NIH or watch the video off my website. You see how much saliva is coming out just by talking. And through that virus can be in every single droplet. And by that, it's dropping on surfaces, or if I'm in your grill, I'm up in your grill, I'm going to drop that virus on you, and it's going to go in your eyes, it's going to go in your nose and your mouth, and then go and set up the factory. Some of us don't get sick. We know that. But the thing is, up to 40% of the spread of this disease is from people who do not have any symptoms. And that's why I see this virus as a little invading spaceship. And then it's a badass little attack plan. The thing is, it's keeping people who do not have symptoms just to walk around and spread it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we know the attack plan. And so by doing that, we can do the counterattack measures. And that's why it's just 3 simple things. It's wear a mask, because when we speak, there's moisture coming out. You have to wear it properly, not one of these things that's falling under your nose, hanging down there, you're adjusting. Just get a little wire up there off your coffee beans, or just be creative. You know, you roll down your coffee beans, you got that little wire, put that over your nose. Then when you go out in public, you're not spreading, because as you know, my mask is to protect you. Your mask is to protect me. It's not for my protection directly. It's because my social responsibility I have for others. And that's why I wear it when I'm out in public places and potentially spreading it. And then hygiene. Think again, as this virus is a little spaceship. So once I'm breathing, it can only go so many feet. If I cough, I could propel it a good distance. So another reason to have the mask. So as long as I attend to my personal hygiene, my surface hygiene, and my distancing hygiene, it makes a difference. Along with stay home if you're sick, because I've seen too many times where people are going out to work while they have illness, taking the ibuprofen to hide their symptoms. And they go there and they spread it to all their employees and coworkers and others. So it's really just 3 simple. I want to say, hey, America, we got this. We got this. Just do these 3 things and we can change the curve dramatically.
Although stay home if you're sick, obviously, is something a lot of people feel like they don't have the option, because they're not going to be able to feed their family if they don't go to work, because most people don't have paid sick leave like every other civilized rich nation on the planet. That being said, do whatever you can. Obviously, I agree with that. Speaking of, why does the spaceship need to be blue in that? Does that matter?
It could be red. You know,
Okay.
We see it as red or anything, but I like the visualization.
And then speaking of hygiene, do you know anything about, do I need to wash my mask other than it just being nasty from me breathing and spitting on it? Like, can I reuse the same mask? I'm big into sustainability, and I don't want to dispose of every single mask that I use. Do you know anything about the sustainability point about masks?
Yes, absolutely. You know, depending on what type of mask, but if you wash it with soap and water, this virus is not that durable. It's the shell on it is broken down by soap quite easily. Or sometimes you also know the lifespan of the virus. So if you have 4, 5, 6 masks, you just cycle through them and then you just let it sit there or put it out in the sun, let the UV hit it for a little bit and shut the spaceship down so it doesn't spread.
Maskofwellness.com. Dr. Dave Krupp, I guess one of my last questions here is, you want businesses to participate in these behaviors and these ideas, and I would imagine they most likely want to, and they want to be a part of changing this norm and making it the norm in our culture and all culture. But has there been any resistance from businesses to want to work with you guys on this campaign? Is anybody saying, no, we're not going to tell our customers how to behave? That's against our ethos?
Yeah, and for clarity, it's not telling the customer. It's up to each business as to whether the patron is going to wear a mask in their business or not. There is some resistance in some communities for the chambers of commerce to recommend it to their businesses because masks are controversial, but yet offer the option to them, because by being a COVID conscious business, and we have a searchable directory we're developing, so consumers can go to our website and search out COVID conscious businesses and start choosing those. And that's where the concept came from, that the consumer can put pressure upon the business, and thus other businesses will have to fall in line. Otherwise, they're going to lose a potential market share. So by this interlaced, intertwined, intricate kind of essence between the business and the consumer, it in turn can bring about change.
Yeah, I should have asked that earlier. That's a really important point. And, we have seen that kind of thing with a lot of different stores. I mean, a lot of stores will say, if you don't have a shirt on, if you don't have shoes on, you can't come in. And other stores now say you can't wear a gun in our store. Yes, our state allows you insanely to walk around with a gun on your hip, or concealed carry, allows you to walk around with a gun hidden. That's an insane idea, in my opinion. Nonetheless, stores can say what you have to wear in their store, and people can decide whether or not they're going to go to that store. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're trying to do here.
Yes, allow capitalism to drive this to improve the wellness of the communities. And again, the health and the wealth of the communities by these three simple, impactful measures. But again, choice. The choice for the consumer, choice of the business to and be involved, because anytime the government puts mandates, it's with restrictions and resistance. But you look through all of history, it is only the grassroots movements that allow free will, free choice because of the heartfelt desire to bring about improvement for their communities, will change happen and stay sustained.
Well, I fully agree with the effort as well as the strategy behind the effort of maskofwellness.com. And listeners will see me be promoting this idea to the point that hopefully we don't need it in you anymore, and you can get back to doing what you do best, which isn't necessarily educating people, but fixing them when they're broken in all kinds of ways. And I look forward to talking with you again. You're obviously a really interesting, super talented, passionate guy, and it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
We really appreciate you having us.
Maskofwellness.com. Is there anything else I should be plugging? There's an email here. Can people email you? Is that private?
Yeah. So they can email just to get in touch, and through that's where we've gotten some of our volunteers reaching out, as well as different organizations, chambers of commerce, about how to bring about spread. We've done nothing to try and promote this over the past couple of weeks while we clean things up, but we're going to start reaching out to the different national organizations. So anybody out there, if you can let two people know about this, about COVID conscious businesses, anybody in the media, anybody that can help promote this idea, then the concept is true and it will spread once people start having awareness. So I really appreciate you having us on, having me on here so we can help talk about us.
The last surgeon who appeared on the podcast, Dr. Prakash Gada, was on MSNBC a couple days later on the news, and then on Rachel Maddow. And I think there's some producers of those shows listening. I hope that they will consider Dr. Krupp as a guest. Obviously, he's smart, passionate, articulate, and I will give you his contact information. Or just go to maskofwellness.com and you can contact him yourself. Dave, keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, gratitude. Thank you for having me.
How about that? Cool cat. Guy can do anything, and he's doing a very good thing here with this public awareness campaign. I highly recommend you check out maskofwellness.com, and I will definitely have Dr. Dave back on the show because, boy, that guy, he really moved me. Fascinating, thoughtful guy who seems to have lived quite a few different lives. Dave Krupp, maskofwellness.com. Thank you, Mark Nolte, who is a subscriber and longtime listener of the show and a really good friend of mine. If there's somebody you think I should interview, have on the show, I bet you I can get him or her. So let me know. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And finally here on the Friday episode, and every Friday, I talk with my friend Christian Finnegan, and we've become closer and closer through these conversations on the podcast each Friday. We had this is a special one for a lot of reasons. I think it gets really personal, and we talk about male body image stuff, which I think is an interesting conversation that you rarely hear, much less between two men. And Christian is funny, he's honest, he's thoughtful, he's curious, he's very intelligent, and I always love talking to him. And give him a follow and say hello on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and you haven't said hi to Christian, thank him for joining me. @ChristFinnegan is his Twitter handle. Buy his comedy albums. Let him know that you bought them. Let him know that you heard him here, because it's just one way to encourage people to come back on. Seriously, a handful of you do it almost every guest in every episode, and I really appreciate that. Tina Winsett and Therese in particular. Shout outs to those two listeners and subscribers. But the more you can let my guests know that you heard them, as many of you did this week with several of our guests, the more important it is, the more valuable it is to me. For those people, there's a billion podcasts out there. Of course, this is the most enlightening one. And I am the hardest working person in all of podcasting, of course. So please let them know that you heard them here. @ChristFinnegan. Here it is right now. I've just started recording with Christian Finnegan, and I was just talking about my daughter, maybe fracturing her, maybe not, last Sunday. And I also just saw a picture of my friend Tom and Leslie of Noble Pies. Tom cut his thumb, and he sent me a picture of his thumb, deep wound. And Christian, you said sometimes when you see these images, or in my case, my daughter made a video, a TikTok of her falling off her skateboard. You said your butthole clenches up. And that's there's got to be a name like that's everybody has that feeling sometimes. Is that a physiological? Has that been studied?
I'm
not
sure
a figure of speech.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's kind of just a protect your sensitive area sort of body impulse. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know what that is, but instinctively, like I feel it right at the tip of my spine, like at the coccyx in my butthole, like just immediately like clinches.
I sometimes get my mom would had a name for that feeling when we were growing up called arrows. She'd go, "Oh, arrows! It feels like there's arrows being like shot into you." And what she meant was her taint.
Yeah, she just didn't want to tell you about her butthole.
Right, but that's what she's talking about.
Which is weird because she talks to me about it all the time.
Is
which
she
is strange.
Still? That's so weird.
Just constantly.
I thought you quit Facebook, but the only reason you're still there is to talk to my mom about her perineum.
No, just text messages. Text me directly.
Oh, it's just you guys are just texting.
Yeah. Slack. Cool. We have Slack.
You have a Slack set up with my mom? That's amazing. I didn't even know she knew how to use it, yet she's communicating with you on it. That's disappointing.
I can't extend this bit any further without it becoming genuinely offensive to your family.
Please do. It's as long as it's
something
funny.
About the term Slack and buttholes. There's some joke to be made there. But you know,
what are the rules with comedy about, say, jokes about your mom, your wife, your kids?
You know, dude, every once in a while you think that you have that kind of friendship with somebody and you quickly realize that you don't. There's a dude who owns a comedy club in New York, and I don't want to mention his name. He's a nice guy, but he asked me to do a podcast a few years ago, but I'd known him probably 2-3 years at the time. And we joked around and you think, okay, this guy can he can participate in the slings and arrows of comedy conversation. And he showed me a picture of his newborn child who has like bright blonde hair, and he and his wife both have dark hair. And so I made like the cliche joke, like, "Hey, what's the milkman look like?" And then I was like, "Ha ha ha, your wife's a whore." Like that was sort of just my dumb joke. Yeah. Just got very serious all of a sudden.
Really?
And it got incredibly tense. And he's like, you can't call my wife a whore. Like it's like where I come from, like that's what that's what you get into fights over. And it's like, and he was furious.
Did you just look at him and be like, prostitute?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Call girl. Should I have said sex worker?
Really, just should have made it worse. Yeah, a sex worker.
But sometimes you. So I've kind of learned to go right up to the edge and then maybe rethink making that one final joke that might make the person actually uncomfortable.
You know, I just used to make all those jokes about my daughters when they were born, and I still do. They're terrifying looking when they came out. And, it's just this idea of parents always talking about how perfect their kids are and how beautiful their kids are. And it's so irritating. So, I like to make jokes about that my daughters are average or something. But if you made a joke about my daughters being
cool.
No, I'd be fine with it. If it were you, if it were maybe if it were a comic who I liked and respected, I'd be like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But maybe I wouldn't like it if it were somebody else, I suppose. That didn't know me. Somebody made a joke about me.
It's like taking liberties. It's somebody implying an intimacy that doesn't exist. We're not friends like that.
There you go. I was with 16 of my high school friends on a Zoom chat, and one of my friends invited his much younger brother, who I never had met. And they were all making jokes about me, childish, sophomoric, old hacky jokes about me, which is fine, but this kid then made one. And I go, no, you're not, I don't know you. You can't, you weren't there for that. You're not invited.
I don't know if you get this, but I get a lot of people who think like, hey, I'm talking to the comedian, I better bust balls. And it's like, no, you're just being an asshole. Like there's a skill. It's like some people can sing on tune, sing in tune, and some people can't. And some people understand joke placement and other people don't. But yeah, you get some people, I'll say something on Twitter and, I'll make some joke where like, oh, thank God I'm wearing sweatpants a lot these days because I've been eating a lot of cookies, just something stupid like that. And somebody would be like, yeah, you look a lot fatter than you used to. Or just something like, dude, what? Stop. And say, hey, I thought you were a comedian.
Right. That's I think the rule is, but it's got to be really pretty funny if you're going to take such a personal shot. It better be good. Better be worth it. Better hit the bullseye.
And that's why I wish a lot of comedians would understand, like, oh, you're not allowed to joke about anything anymore. It's like, yeah, you are. It's just there's a thing called degree of difficulty. You know, that if you're going to try to jump, if you want to raise the bar and you want to go to child molestation or rape or any of the things that, I mean, you know, the joke has to justify it, and you are taking that risk, and you can't then hide behind, hey, I'm all joking. It's like, well, then there's no difference between joking and speaking. If the jokes don't have to be funny, you can just claim joke status, like no gives backsies. You know, I was telling a joke. Well, then what is a joke then? Jokes are meaningless.
Well said. But I mean, I think that this is not just a conversation that comedians have. I mean, anybody can have this conversation. Like, you know, it's a bunch of guys hanging out. They've known each other a long time. They know the sense of humor. Same rules apply.
Yeah.
Degree of difficulty.
I mean, it's that classic, the Charlie Murphy, Rick James sketch, you know, called Rick James a habitual line stepper. You know, you know, about there's a line and he would constantly step over. It's like, hey, he was a habitual line stepper. You know, some people pretend that they don't know where the line is. They're well aware where the line is, but they play that game where I'm going to say something that I know is offensive. And then when you react, I'm going to act like you're crazy. I mean, I guess now the term we would use is gaslighting, but yes, but that sort of idea of like, whoa, I guess someone's offended. It's like, dude, you know what you were doing.
Exactly.
There's a comedian. Fuck it, I'll say his name.
Here we go.
There's an old friend of mine, Liam McEnany, and I used to refer to my wife when she would do that. I was like, "You're pulling a Liam right now."
That's hard.
You're pulling a Liam, because he would do that all the time. He would say something he knew would piss you off, and then when you would get upset, he'd be like, "Oh, I guess you're upset about that." Well, yes, and you knew that, and that's why you said it.
It's a weird thing to have your name become an adjective like that, a description of the behavior. And I actually have one. Joe Matarese.
By the way, Liam's a friend of mine. I do love for the record.
Liam, but
habitual line stepper.
but Joe Matarese, who is a friend of mine, has don't Pete Dominic me or something like that, which has something to do with, in his opinion, my anger issues. Which I was like, wow, that's really it's really upsetting to me, because that's not something that I think about myself that is true, but it's forcing me to look at myself. Really? Do I have this issue with you or with others? And so
I think if you hear it twice, then you really have
from different people,
two disparate people. Yeah. I mean, it's like, have you ever done a roast? Like a roast? Have you ever?
No, I would never be a part of one. I don't like them.
Even amongst like friends, like not like a live show, but even just like a personal roast among friends.
I wouldn't want. I love to watch them. And it's just a thing that is so brutal to me and so hurtful, as funny as it is. I'm the kind of person that actually is so sensitive that I will laugh and cry at the same time. I've done that often. Like, I'll have tears come to my, like, I have a true mixing of emotions. I recognize how funny something is, but it also might hurt me, and they both come out at the same time. It's a weird, interesting, unhelpful superpower.
When I've done roasts in the past, because I've done the roast shows like Roast Battle that, you know, you go to a comedy club, and those things, they can be fun, but usually they just end up being like, this is what this guy looks like. This is what this guy looks like. Because people in the audience don't know these people. So you can't do like really deep jokes about their personalities and stuff. But I've also done roasts where, you know, a group of friends and I used to rent out like a party room at a restaurant once a year, and there'd be like 15 to 25 of us, or, you know, 15 to 20 of us. And we would do a roast. And those were the most fun nights of my life, because these are people who I've known for, you know, at the time, 15, 20 years. And you can really get specific. These are people who I'm on like an ongoing CC email list with for the past 20 years. So you can really get granular. But I always get upset. Not upset is too strong a word. I get bummed when people don't get me. Like when they don't. Like, really, have I made so little of an impact in your life that you can't come up with a good, specific joke about me? It has to be some lame crap about how I lost weight once or some stupid shit like that. Like, there's got to be something. Don't you know how shitty I am? Like, aren't you paying attention to what a just loathsome human being I am? Can't you really laser focus in on what a douche I am?
That is a very interesting look into your soul, and I'm sure you're not alone in feeling that way. Do you really not know me enough to ping me hard? Come on.
Yeah, because it feels good on some level to me when somebody really gets me and like says my insecurity out loud. It really. I did one against Pat Dixon once at the Stand, and and he referred to, or maybe it was Pete Lee, but one of them referred to my tight smile, which really got me because I'm an incredibly awkward smiler. Like I don't know how to smile on command or naturally. And so it comes across as like this just goofy grin. And I think Pete Lee referred to my wine blogger face. And I thought that was very funny.
Oh my gosh, that's very good. That's very funny. See, I love those types of jokes that are very specific and very subtle as well. So I've got to say, after your appearance on Christian joins me on Fridays here on the podcast, and longtime listener and subscriber Carrie says, Christian Finnegan has got to be my favorite regular guest, so I especially look forward to Fridays. He was always my favorite fill-in host when you took vacation in the past. He's super honest, forthcoming, able to articulate his thoughts so vividly, and uses such creative and apt analogies. You guys are awesome together. It's such a great conversation. How about that feedback?
That is very nice.
Speaking of
I
nice
wish there had been at least one insult in there.
Oh, I wasn't finished if you had interrupted me. The only thing that bothers me is his very tight smile.
No, Carrie. Is that her name, Carrie?
And then also, this is kind of a criticism.
By the way, thank you. That was an incredibly nice, very nice thing to say.
Yeah, I love that about. I realized the things that he said are so true about the way that you communicate, especially here with me. Well, always, but that you're able to articulate your thoughts so vividly, and your analogies. He's not the only person to talk about your analogies. You're getting a compliment on the way that you use analogies, which I love. I love when anybody uses it. I'm not good at it. But I think it's
really. See, I disagree with that because I'm thinking specifically. It's a stand-up bit. So, I mean, I think a lot of stand-up is finding analogies. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about your parking spot bit that you used to do all the time.
Oh yeah,
which I mean is just a grand analogy. Essentially, I mean it's a sex analogy, but it's like But I think that's something that. I've got a few that I've done. That's not particularly original, maybe, but I'm not good at them. I've got a few. It's like I got a few, but I'm not as good. Like you can do them off the cuff when articulating yourself about a point. And I think that's a really good skill when you're communicating in a podcast format or in a conversation. It helps illustrate a point and helps people understand where you're coming from. And you're particularly good at that. Now, here's a criticism for us. It's not really a criticism, but this guy's a longtime listener and he's been in recovery, and like his alcohol problem. And his son has had an alcohol problem, like really bad, really struggled. And his name is Jim from Michigan. And he says, here's a bit of criticism. The booze talk is a lot more than it used to be. And while I'm not terribly concerned, I do get curious as to why so much. Perhaps you always enjoyed adult beverages, but just not to mention it so much. But as a recovering person, I get a little concerned when someone who did not seem to drink much all of a sudden is drinking more. Please take this concern in the spirit it's given. You know how long we've been chatting. And even though you've on air made it clear that's not a problem, there's a whole lot more chatting about it than I've ever heard. And it's interesting because it's a valid point. Sure it is. Absolutely it is. And my dad makes the same argument. He's like, on this episode, how much did you talk about smoking dope and drinking? And, smoking dope is dope is a real fun. One time my dad came to a show of mine at Caroline's where I was opening for Pete Corielli and Jim Brewer. And as you can imagine with Corielli especially, there was some weed smoking happening in the green room, and I had just walked out of there. And this is long before I'd come out to my dad that I use cannabis. And he says to me, whispers to me, he's like, I think they're smoking dope in there. Yeah, it's a generational thing. Obviously, my dad told me that my dad was a friggin' narc. He was in grad school, and he was, I guess, the RA of his. I was the RA. Oh, were you really? Yeah. Oh my gosh! Yeah. You had a drawer full of condoms to hand out. I drop of a hat. Never busted anybody but a guy who was beating up his girlfriend. That was the only bust I ever made. Wow. I'm proud of it. And I, other than that, I just blackmailed students. My dad went to BC, and he was like a Catholic and all that, and so he didn't know what marijuana smelled like. He thought it smelled like Catholic incense because that's what all of the kids in the dorm, they would burn incense when they were smoking pot. And so whenever he smelled incense, he would go bust them for smoking weed because he was a friggin' drag. That is hilarious. I don't know who told me this story, but I'll never forget. I think it was like a caller once when she said, we were talking about weed and your parents smoking weed and hypocrisy of it, whatever. And she said that when she went off to college, her freshman year, she walked in a room and found out these kids were smoking weed, and she'd never been around it, or so she thought. Because she said, oh, my gosh, this whole room smells like my dad's bathroom growing up. And then she was like, wait a second. And for that story alone, I told my daughters
a couple years ago that I smoked weed because I did not want them to catch me. And I've been very honest with my kids, just my parenting style. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I don't want them to think I'm a phony and that I'm disingenuous about it. And, I tell them I didn't drink till I was 22. I didn't smoke weed till I was 25. But yeah, I do both now. And so the point of bringing this up in this email from the listener is, my dad doesn't drink. I don't think he ever had a problem, but he quit when my brother went off to rehab when we were teenagers. It was a dramatic event in our life. But a lot of listeners that are in recovery, they don't want to hear a conversation about drinking. And I get torn as a host. I'm like, well, I want to be honest, much less a comedian. I want to be honest about like myself and everything. But how do you convince yourself, much less other people, that I don't have a problem with it?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for you. You seem to be someone who genuinely really doesn't have much to worry about. And I think maybe you seem very invested in the lives of your family. And I think that helps you not tip over into a danger zone. As far as I go, I do worry about it slightly. I don't worry in the sense that I'm going to become some raging, just blackout drunk. That's never been my thing. That's never how I've used alcohol. But I do worry sometimes just from a pure health perspective that I know it's not good for my weight. I know it's not good for my enjoyment of my sober hours, that it cuts down my productivity and my time. And so it is something I do struggle with. I mean, I still think that I can have a relationship with it without cutting it off entirely, but I'm kind of at the end of trying to finesse this. There's been a certain degree of, since the pandemic started, there's been a certain degree of, hey, all bets are off. It's kind of like when you're on a plane, you're like, I can eat whatever the hell I want because I'm on a plane. Right. And did we talk about this last week?
I feel like I might have heard that before, but it's fine.
We may have spoken about this.
That's fun.
But in that part, I will say the fun part of quarantine feels like it's coming to an end, and so if there has been a fun part, so I don't disagree with your listener, just in the sense that, first of all, I can understand that it would be a drag if you're in recovery to just hear like, hey, booze, booze, booze.
Yep.
But also, I think it's a healthy thing for all of us as we're getting through this to ask myself, is this a positive force in my life or is it not? And I can't say that I have a definitive answer on that right now.
You also mentioned food. You've talked about this in a lot of your specials, eating, food, and diet. And I read this week that America's gained an average of 15 pounds or something like that as a result of the pandemic. How have you dealt with food, your relationship with food now in the pandemic, and how has it evolved over the past? I've always wanted to talk with you about it. And you've got so much to say, and that you've really done the work on that.
Well, I did, and I feel like I've done the work and now I've lost the work, quite frankly. I've always had issues with food in general. As a kid, I would gain weight and lose weight a lot. I was, I refer to my body as basically like a human accordion, that I just kind of get fat and skinny, but skinny less often these days. But I sprained my ankle super badly about 10 days ago. And so that now I can't even really exercise. Like I can do some stuff with weights, but I can't jog right now. And so I'm acutely aware of how fat I'm getting. Because sometimes even if on the scale it says the same, just being able to go out and go for a run, you feel healthier, even if your pants, even if your clothes fit the same or whatever.
Yeah, any kind of cardiovascular activity tends to. Yes. There's a lot of proof that it can make you. Have you thought of top jumping jacks?
What is that?
It's when your lower body's injured, you just do the top.
Is that effective?
Just made it up. I mean, I think you would go mad. Okay. I just want there to be a video of that exercise out there. Your lower body's injured.
I'll just do like YMCA, like they do at sporting events. Just that for hours.
So when you say you feel like you've lost it all, you don't feel like you've lost the knowledge about what works for you psychologically, much less physically. You know what works for you. It's just harder. What do you mean when you say you lost it all?
Well, I do think that I've lost the long-term discipline there that I used to have because I know that the results would be much harder to achieve now than they were in my early 30s, which is when I lost like 90 pounds. If I did the exact same thing I did then now, I would not achieve the same results. And that makes me a bit like, well, screw it then, you know, and also my goals are slightly different. Like I had never been sort of a thin person as an adult until my early 30s. And so I got really intoxicated by losing weight, and you start to become that guy that's all they can talk about. And that's all they're interested in is losing weight. And then for about 5 years, it kind of felt like I just had momentum, like my metabolism had sped up and I didn't really have to think about it a whole lot. And yes, I was able to start, having a cocktail with friends or eating out at restaurants and not being a complete buzzkill by, looking through the menu and finding the one thing I could eat. And I could just live like a normal person. And then it just sort of like, I can have a candy bar. Well, I can have a candy bar and a cookie, and I can have potato chips. And it just starts to add up. And I'm not lying. It's been really hard during this quarantine time, just because sometimes it's just a matter of something to do. It's just like, it's been an hour. Yeah. I'm going to go grab a snack. Just there's just nothing to fill up your day. And so you kind of mark your days by like how long until I can eat something again. And also I'm the kind of person who needs a beverage next to me at all times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's that about?
It's like an oral manual fixation. Like I chew the hell out of my fingers and I chew pen caps all the time. And I never smoked cigarettes, and thank God I didn't, because I would be a demon. And I'm just the kind of person who needs a beverage. And, you end up either drinking beers or even soda or whatever more than you should, just because you need something to do with your hands.
Get the seltzer maker.
We do, but I don't know. It's a little bit of work. It's work. It is work. And the bottle is like tiny. It's like one and a half glasses of seltzer every time you want to make it.
I wish I invented that thing. I feel like that was a kind of a bad thing. I still use it a lot, but my thing, by the way, not that you asked, but my relationship with food is weird in that I don't eat that much. I don't love to eat. And it's like, I'm not going to say I'm lucky necessarily, because not eating is not necessarily healthy, but I don't know. It doesn't fulfill an emotional need in you to eat or not eat. I think my emotional relationship with food, I learned, was that when I lost my job and went into this deep darkness for the first time in my life, eating was not a priority. It can be one of two things, I suppose. And for me, I think I've tried to unpack that. Like, I didn't deserve anything good. Food, sex, happiness, I didn't deserve it. There was this deep-seated kind of feeling of failure that I would only, and so I didn't eat, and I lost like 15 pounds, and it was God, bad. I hate hearing that. Like, I know it was a sad time for you, but I'm so fucking jealous. I'm like, I wish that's how I reacted to situations like that. I think it's pretty
opposite. I will stand in line. I will punish myself for eating shitty food before I've even ordered it. Back when I was heavy in my 20s, I would go to this Chinese restaurant all the time, and I would get half fried chicken and French fries. And it was Kennedy Fried Chicken, the Kentucky Fried Chicken knockoff.
The knockoff,
And I would be standing in line, and I'd be like, "You fucking loser! Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're doing. This is what you deserve. This is who you're going to be." Yeah, it's already like the die is already cast. And sometimes I've talked to my therapist about this. I will have this thing in me that I want to beat myself. Like, yeah, I hear you, inner voice telling me that I can be healthy and that I can get through this. I'm going to overcome you. Watch me do the bad thing anyway.
Oh, wow.
Watch me sabotage myself. I'm stronger than you, motherfucker.
Oh, it's a weird angel devil shoulder thing.
Yeah, but it's on some weird level, turning into the skid feels like a victory on some level.
I wonder if I've never really thought about this, but I probably, as you're talking, I have a real passion or interest in feeling good, and is in all of the moments in life. And one of the things for me about, my body is that I only kind of came into my own in my early 20s when I became a personal trainer, and I was a high school and college athlete, but I was never where I wanted to be in terms of the way I looked. And then I was, and it felt so good that I just desperately wanted to stay there, and I've stayed around there most of my life. I lost it when the girls were born, but I'm in probably the best shape of my life right now. Not in great shape, but pretty good, because I want to feel good in every way. Does that make any sense?
Pete, I've seen that beach photo of you. You're doing okay.
I'm back. That's an old one. I'm even better right now. But why is that? I don't know. Like, do you feel like? Don't you feel like you want to feel good? Like, thinking about your career, thinking about body image, and
you would think. I mean, I was.
God, that bird is amazing in the background. Your mic is great, and I hear that beautiful bird.
Yeah, there's a bird out the window. Singing.
I like it. I like it a lot. Could you just be quiet?
It's really nice here. I don't remember what you were saying.
Feeling good about yourself.
Yeah. I wish when I was really in good shape around 2006 to 2010, I did love it. I did love it, but I will say, I don't necessarily know that it helped my career. In fact, I know it didn't. It hurt my career. Like, there's no question in my mind.
Really?
First of all, from a stand-up perspective, I lost my everyman quality.
Yeah.
In the sense that not that I looked like some marquee idol, but it was just like a lot of the sort of mean jokes that I would tell when I was heavy came across meaner when I had lost weight. I could just see it. I could see it in people's faces. I could just see the reaction of it. I also became awkwardly self-conscious of my appearance, which, I think, you start dressing a little nicer than you start trying to look cool on stage. And to me, there's nothing less funny than that, than somebody who's trying to look good. Also, just from a completely cornball casting perspective, I was never in good enough shape to be like the good looking guy, like the ripped dude. But I also wasn't the funny fat guy anymore. I was just this sort of nothing. But
it's such an unhealthy, I can't think of anything outside of artists, live performers that really have to deal with this. I suppose there's probably a lot, but it's a very unhealthy mind fuck to say, I've got to stay in this bad place for the material to come and, in your case, what you're saying, to work. I mean, the best example of that is Artie Lang. Like, if he ever straightened his life out, he didn't think he's going to be funny. And there's a whole bunch of obviously very overweight comedians like John Panette or Ralphie May. Like, if I lose this weight, my whole act is my weight. I mean, I remember Bobby Slayton, who's a very funny comedian. When his wife tragically died, he's like, there goes my act. He was like, his whole act was about complaining about his marriage. And it's a weird, you don't become healthier because it's such great material, or then that material doesn't work and you don't know how to adapt. It's a very unhealthy thing about us.
Or if nothing else, it just makes you ambivalent about it. Like, even if it doesn't completely sabotage you, you're not as gung-ho as you might otherwise be,
So my question is, like, I was talking to a woman recently who's like 55. She struggled with her weight her whole life. She's very obese now, very overweight. And she basically said she doesn't want to try anymore because she's yo-yoed up and down so often that she can't deal with the depression and sadness of losing it and gaining it back again. And that's a struggle. Do you feel as you go older, anything similar there in terms of the emotional confrontation that you have to have when you have the success and then lose it? Is it something that?
Yes. My goals are very different now than they used to be. My goal right now is to, I have a number in mind weight wise, and I don't really care about a specific number. It's like a certain waist size, a certain set of clothes that I want to be able to wear. Mm-hmm. The problem with me is that it's like, I have like 3 different wardrobes for depending on what weight my body is. And I don't want to throw them all out because who knows when I'm going to lose weight again. And so we end up just like wasting a lot of money. There's clothes that I've spent a lot of money on, especially when I get thin. I get my taste gets much more expensive when I lose weight than when I'm on the fatter side of things, which is in a way good, because I like reward myself like, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars on this suit jacket because I can fit into it. But as a result, I've worn them like twice, but I don't want to throw them out because they're perfectly good.
Yep.
I mean, that's a dumb example, but
no, it's an example. You cite something I think a lot of people listening probably can relate to. And by the way, men just don't have this conversation nearly enough, which is why I love talking to you, because you're so honest and vulnerable about it all. I mean, it's not as if men don't have all kinds of struggle with the way that we look and our body image. And obviously people like you and me, make our living, being in front of people, being on camera. So it's something you have to think about even more than, an engineer or a physician or any number of other professions. I mean, it always matters, but
well, it was always a part of my family too. It's like my entire family, other than my younger brother, who was health-wise wasn't able to gain weight because he was sick. But my mother was morbidly obese. My dad has struggled with his weight his entire life. My older brother was super morbidly obese and died of a heart attack at 37 because of it. And it's always been a thing in my family. And I don't know whether that's purely a chemical nature thing or whether some of it's nurture. When I was a kid, and again, not to get all deep or
I like any story that starts when I was a kid. Go for it. I think I've mentioned, my mother had borderline personality disorder, and she was a difficult person to live with, specifically for me. And when my dad had moved out, and when my two brothers and I were just living with my mother, our shopping, she wasn't really able to function like a normal adult. And our grocery shopping every day was, we would go to the convenience store and we would get treats. That's what shopping. We would buy, a big thing of pinwheel cookies, a giant bag of Ruffles, and like those gelatinous orange slices that are covered in sugar. Yes.
Meanwhile, no toilet paper. Right. Lights get turned off because the electricity wasn't paid, but we are, we have our pinwheel cookies.
Very, very common. Very common. Yeah. And also it creates such an impact for you as you develop, as you go, it matters so much what your parents introduced you, what resources and opportunities you had access to in life, but especially in food, You don't even know what is healthy food. You don't even know what is a fruit or a vegetable or anything
and
about
what you associate with what a meal should look like and what being done should feel like.
Right. And then finally, obviously, we could get deep on this, but just the idea of capitalism and constantly telling you, eat this. I mean, just thinking about the one that always comes to mind for me is the sugar cereals and the advertisements that would say part of a nutritious breakfast, much less milk. I mean, milk was marketed towards us for a generation as being something we desperately needed for our bones. And it's like, you can get calcium in other ways. But that stuff gets forced down our throats and our minds. And a lot of people never unlearn it.
Yeah. Well, and even when you try to do the quote unquote right thing, it's all smoke and mirrors. A couple months, right when quarantine was starting, I was at the grocery store, and when I'm up in the woods like I am now, I eat breakfast. Usually when I'm in the city, I don't eat breakfast, or if I do, it's like a banana or something like that. But I've been enjoying having a bowl of cereal every morning, and and I like Raisin Bran. They were out of Raisin Bran because it was when the supermarkets were all empty, and so I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to treat myself. I got a big box of Crunch Berries. And I made fun of myself. I tweeted about how pathetic it was. I felt bad about myself, but I was enjoying it. And then the next time I was at the supermarket, I actually compared the back of the Crunch Berries to the Raisin Bran. You know what? Not really any different in terms of sugar.
Those raisins are covered in sugar. That's how they get you.
Yeah. It really is almost negligible, the difference.
When you checked out and you had a giant box, as you say, of Crunch Berries, talk to me about
I don't have kids.
Talk to me about the
the worst thing, and I don't want to talk more booze talk. They
don't know I don't have kids.
I'm sorry to your listener who is in recovery, and please, this is maybe a clearer sign that maybe I need to make some changes in my life. There have been a few times that when I'm up in the country, we're up here and there's a liquor store that we drive to, and it's not, it's a little bit of a drive, so you kind of want to stock up. At least 3 times when I've come up to the counter at the liquor store, the guy has been like, "Oh, big party tonight." I'm like, nope. My wife doesn't even drink. This is all for me.
He should know better.
You're right. He should know better. It's a convenience store that opened a liquor store a couple of years ago. So I think that they weren't really
conditioned in
the liquor protocol.
Well, because I've mentioned it, and I'm just gonna keep plugging this because what is more pathetic? I am now apparently easily bought off into a conversation. Last week, a subscriber, longtime listener, Isaac, who's a great guy, was like, I'll buy you a bottle of whiskey and so you can do a Zoom chat with me and my buddy. And we want to talk about the whiskey because they're like whiskey nerds. I'm like, fine. And so anybody who wants to buy me a bottle and so we can hang out on Zoom, done. I don't care what absinthe, whatever the liquor, because it's such a generous thing. Like the guy finds my local liquor store, purchases it, and I just go and keep picking up bottles. It's the weirdest thing to come out of the show.
And if anyone wants to then arrange a meeting for Pete afterwards, that would be fine too.
I should just come up with some more obscure things that they could buy though too for me to have to bond over. Maybe a box.
An AA meeting, Pete. That's what
someone's gonna tell me.
No, you're right. You should just be like, oh man, I really would love a bird feeder, and just see what people just keep buying you.
You know what I need is a Tesla. So, by the way, I put up a poll today. Who do you like the least? I think was the question. Elon Musk of Tesla, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, or Jack Dorsey of Twitter? Check in on that poll. Do you have feelings about any of them?
I think, boy, that is a real melange of douche. It is douche stew. I would say Zuckerberg probably.
Yeah, he's definitely done the most damage, and is the least likely to admit it or do anything about it.
He seems to be the most impervious to human intervention as well.
That's a great point. This week, the president also got dinged finally by Twitter. They are now kind of, what are they're tagging his tweets with fact checks, and so the president has retaliated against Twitter, and so have so many on the right, saying it's censoring speech. And do you have any thoughts on that? Twitter handling it that way?
Well, I mean, part of me feels like this is what happens when you go to half measures. This is a strange association, but I remember when the Affordable Care Act was being passed, they wanted to make sure that it appealed to Republicans. And so they had the individual mandate put in, and that was kind of their nod to the Romney plan from years ago. And sort of like, this is to show you Republicans that we Democrats are serious about making sure that this is paid for and that everyone has to buy in. And so it won't just become a government funded thing. And wouldn't you know it, the individual mandate is what the right has tried to kill Obama with, that they had it struck down in the Supreme Court. And that's what this sort of reminds me of, is that Twitter as a private company, which it is, regardless of what anyone says. And if they aren't a private company, well, then that opens up the rules to a lot of things that I think people on the right would not appreciate. If they are a private company, the answer is to delete his account and to cancel his account. As a private company, you have violated our standards, our rules, and so we are going to kick you off this platform. Of course, they're not going to do that
all the time.
No, of course not. And it becomes,
they delete people's accounts all the time. People break Twitter's rules, and they constantly, and we can quibble about many of them, whether or not they were too harsh on this or on that.
But if they had done that, that would have been a clean solution. It's very easy to defend. We are a private company. We have standards. You violated them. You're off, period. The rules are the same for everybody. But they didn't want to do that because they were worried about all the backlash. They're like, all right, well, we'll do this sort of half measure of sort of implying that maybe your tweets aren't, they're fact checking these tweets or whatever. Okay, well, what you've done now is you've given them the sword to kill you with, because now they can be like, oh, well, you're who's going to fact check the fact checkers, who decides what's real and what's not. You are now no longer a public platform. You're no longer a platform. You are a publishing entity that Code 230 or whatever. I don't remember. The principle I'm talking about.
Yeah, the regulation, telecommunications regulation. I don't know the numbers.
Well, yeah, I've read it and I can't remember. I just know Section 230. That's all I know. But so I feel like I understand that they wanted to do something, and on some level, I appreciate finally some sort of limp pushback.
Yeah,
but I think they would have been better served to have just actually stood on principle and said, you're off. Of course, they can't do that because all of these social media companies are financed by rage and interaction. And a lot of that comes on these obsessive twerps on the right. Yeah. And so the thing is, I always wonder, where are they going to go? They already tried Gab. It didn't work. So, but I think the secret is that I think Jack Dorsey probably, I think a lot of these guys, if they are not full on conservative, they understand where their bread is buttered.
Yes.
And they don't want to hear it from liberals.
Right. Fair enough. I think that's really true. What about, as this not all started, but this week, it was as a result, the president has been for years now going after Joe Scarborough, going after each other. And they have this weird, I wish they'd both go away, but they have this horrible, obviously, relationship. And the president this week insinuating that Joe Scarborough murdered the woman who died in his office. And the reason why this is an interesting one is because the woman's family and her widow are begging him to stop doing this. And he's continuing to do it. And his defenders, even in right-wing media, aren't. I mean, Russia's defending it a little bit, but I haven't seen. He's not
even defending it on principle, though. He's defending it like, oh my God, look at what a troll he is. He threw out the term. He's throwing gasoline on a fire in a complimentary way. Usually, when people say throwing gasoline on a fire, he's like, he's just throwing gasoline on a fire, and look at them all get upset,
right?
Them all lose their minds. He's such a genius. It's like, no. He's amoral, and he has no moral gag reflex. That's
but I think some Republicans, certainly in Congress, and those who understand what it takes for him to get reelected, are saying this isn't helping you. Like it's not necessarily helping you, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's a strain. But someone might argue that everything he's doing now is just a distraction from the historic unemployment rates and the historic pandemic. Everything is a distraction from those two things for him.
Perhaps, but I don't think he's that deep. I don't think he's deep on that level. It's a distraction in his own mind from those things. I don't necessarily think that he's got some plan of like, I don't want people to look at the death toll, so I'm going to create this Twitter battle. I think that he looks at the death toll and it gives him the oogies and it makes him uncomfortable. And so just on a lizard brain level, he pivots to something else. I don't think it's any political grand plan. I just think it's like, I cannot spend any time thinking about anything in which I am not the aggrieved conqueror.
Speaking of news this week, black folks in America said to themselves, I can't think about anything but not being killed for just being alive. We saw a number of horrible situations, from the Central Park lady, who everybody is calling Karen, who called the police on a guy who was bird watching, to what happened in Texas. A guy, apparently ran a stop sign and he was held at gunpoint. They threw his 90-year-old grandmother down. And of course, what's going on in Mississippi with this poor guy who was
Minnesota.
In Minneapolis. I'm sure something happened in Mississippi too. That actually is the sad point, that that these horrible acts of violence are being perpetrated on black bodies and lives every day. But it's only the ones that are caught on camera that we ever really learn the true story about. So this poor guy in Minneapolis was murdered. He was tortured, I think it's fair to say, when a cop just held his knee in his neck, and some dirtbag somewhere, I just read this right before we went on, tried to defend it by saying, if someone says I can't breathe, they clearly can breathe. Technically, that's actually true. You might be able to breathe enough to get those words out, but you're under a labored breathing. Like, it pissed me off so much that someone would find a way to excuse that by saying, what that guy said. But
and let's just set that aside, how incredibly stupid and absurd and what a bad faith argument that is.
Yeah.
The guy died, so clearly he couldn't breathe. Do you know what I mean? Like, what point are you trying to make here? The person who said, I can't breathe, suffocated to death. So your response is, well, clearly he didn't die. Like, is that your response? Like, you can't make the argument that it was fine because he was able to say, I can't breathe, because he died. So whatever point you're trying to make, as stupid as it was, isn't relevant.
So I realize that we're two white guys talking about this, but
it's always a little odd. I mean, on one hand, it's like we should be talking about it, but I don't want to pretend I have any I don't have any insight that wouldn't be given by somebody smarter than me.
Fair enough. And I have all kinds of guests that are experts on this issue that I talk to, as you know, but still, I do think this is a white-rooted problem. It's affecting black people, but we are the ones that can create the change. It's like, I know a lot of smart black people are just throwing their hands up, but like, there's nothing more that we can do. It's you have to do this. You have to tell your friends, coworkers, relatives that this way of thinking has to end. And so I think that the onus is on the people who are creating the oppression, who are falling for these generation-old, negative, horrible stereotypes, that we're the ones that have to do something. We're the ones that have to create the change if there's going to be any. We're the ones that have to acknowledge the truth about history and the truth about the present, and we're not doing a very good job, it would seem.
No, yeah, and it's not even just that we have to. I'm sorry, let me be a little more succinct about this. We have to aim higher than just not doing the bad things ourselves. I think a lot of people, and I'll say white people, but I'll say any people who are unencumbered by racial prejudice or government oppression. We think, well, if I'm not doing the bad thing, then I've done enough. And I've got a busy life. I've got things to do. I don't have time to protest every single thing. I didn't do it, and I'm guilty of that. But I think when you start seeing this just happen over and over again, you come to the conclusion that it's just not good enough. It's not, I had sent you this article. I'm only kind of relating the two now, but Larry Kramer passed away this past week, who was a playwright. He also co-founded Gay Men's Health Crisis and founded ACT UP, and was a very loomed large in New York in the late 80s and 90s. And I was a playwriting major at NYU, and so I had read The Normal Heart and didn't really think it was a very good play. I thought it was basically a piece of propaganda, and it was just kind of ranting polemic. And he was kind of a guy who I found annoying because I thought like, oh, this is counterproductive. He's doing all these stunts to create attention. And that's just not the way change happens. Why can't he be more reasonable? Because I'm not homophobic, and I want people with AIDS to get the medicine and the help that they need. But he's turning me off with the way he's acting. And then you look at stuff like this, which was going on with Ahmaud Marbury and Breonna Taylor. And then you realize, oh, that's why you're angry. Obviously I don't mean to conflate the gay rights, the AIDS activism with Black Lives Matter, but the principle is the same, is that being annoying and being in your face is the only way I can get you motherfuckers to pay attention. And I'm definitely that person. There have been plenty of times in my life where I have been in maybe a college class with a black student who I thought made everything about race, or why are they so confrontational? Why is this? There's a woman that was in a class, a writing class of mine, who I just thought just got upset about every little thing that happens. Like, what is her problem? Why can't she just be cool? And then you see, oh, this is why you can't do that. And, I think that we on the white left, so to speak, have to be a little more annoying ourselves. First of all, we have to be more accepting of the rage that is coming at us justifiably from people who genuinely experience oppression and racism. But also, we have to apply, I think, some of that same pressure on the right. I don't think it's enough to just be like, hey, I'm just going to be very reasonable. I'm not saying we have to start throwing rocks through windows yet. But I think that being annoying and being in people's face is a completely understandable and justifiable reaction to the facts on the ground. There's a lot of words to say, not much, but you know what I mean.
No, you said a lot, and it was really well said, and I appreciate it. I also just think that sometimes you can be proactive. There's things that you can do to create opportunities for people of color, for minorities who have been historically discriminated against. And one of the things that we just don't talk about enough is our networks are our networks. It's where you came up, where you went to school, where you work. Those are the people that you are friends with. Those are the people that you're close with. And usually a lot of research says they're like you in many ways. And so the opportunities the doors are closed to far too many people, so we can all be more proactive and go on the offensive and open doors for people so that they have the same opportunities that we had because of the old networks that we came up in. Is the only thing I would add to that.
And I've been on writing staffs. I mean, I've staffed a show. I sold a show to A&E a few years ago, me and Sherrod Small, that dealt with race. And so when we were accepting packets from writers, these were conversations we had. It was difficult because okay, we can only afford 3 writers. And, we didn't want to have an all white staff, but at the same time, a lot of the people the vast majority of the people who had credits and knew what a packet was supposed to look like and just had that experience of TV writing were people like me, people look like me. And so you think to yourself, well, I don't want to hire somebody who can't do this job, but then those people never get that job. And I kind of look at it as, college admissions, affirmative action. It's like, separate the fact of this generation of students that you're letting into college. Think about their kids. Think about what the next generation, the opportunities that their children are going to have because we tried to level the playing field now. I think of it as an investment in a more equal future.
Well said. Final question for you or subject is, you sent me this Twitter thread that explained why certain right-wing gun people are wearing Hawaiian shirts. And it was indeed fascinating and convoluted in how they got there. But the question, and basically they believe in and want desperately, apparently, a civil war. You just watched, and apparently a lot of other people have. I didn't even know about it. The Ulysses Grant documentary on the History Channel. You're the second person to mention it. I didn't even know it existed. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But civil war in America in 2020, I just don't get that. I don't understand that conversation. I don't understand that impulse because we are going to see individual acts of violence. But the Civil War was about a number of states seceding. Not one state is going to take up arms against another state. In my mind, I don't see there being any kind of organized effort to create two sides where it would fight. I just see crazy people doing crazy things with weapons.
Well, that's the question. Is this just cosplaying, or is it at what point do you have to take it seriously, and what does taking it seriously look like?
Right.
The idea of it being regional warfare, like you said, is a little silly now. It's not like one state against another state.
I think so. I don't know how that could be.
The world is so interconnected now. Yeah. Someone in Maine and someone in California can be communicating, via, 50 different ways online. And so, back if you lived in Tennessee in the mid 19th century, chances are most of the people you knew lived in Tennessee. And so that's why it happened on a state by state level.
Great point.
If civil strife happened now, it would look much different. It would look more like a rash on America as opposed to sort of one section against another section. I think it would be a lot of sort of individual flare-ups. If there would be any divide, it would be urban versus rural, I imagine. But I still hope that this is just, people are into the idea of civil war the same way that people are into collecting old cars. And, I collect, old guitars, and that's my hobby. It's like, well, I'm really into the idea of planning for civil war. That's my hobby. I hope that is the case, but it becomes more prevalent every day. And the Hawaiian shirt thing, I had always wondered that. I had noticed that a couple times.
Yeah, I hadn't even noticed that. I didn't know about it. I feel like
it wasn't even, I'd noticed it so little that I didn't even necessarily know it was a thing. But then I thought to myself, yeah, I have seen a few of those dudes wearing Hawaiian shirts, and it seems bizarre. But if you read it, you can look this up. But they started off as sort of an internet meme referring to like a second Civil War as Electric Boogaloo, which is, break into Electric Boogaloo. It's the hackiest comedy reference in the world. Anytime anybody refers to Electric Boogaloo, I'm like, okay, you're clearly not very creative. But they started referring to the Civil War too as Electric Boogaloo. And then they started riffing on that, and it became Big Luau. And it was Big Igloo, Big Luau. And so for whatever reason, Big Luau is sort of the code that a lot of the sort of fascist prankster element, they're like the ones that kind of claim plausible deniability, like, hey, this is all a joke, or is it? Big Luau became a way for them to refer to the Second Civil War. And so a lot of these dudes have started wearing Hawaiian shirts at these protests as sort of a signal that, hey, I'm ready for the Big Luau.
Well explained. When you saw, final question for you, Christian, when you saw that picture, which I'm guessing you did, of all those people in the, was it Lake of the Ozarks Resort, wherever that was, and all these people in a pool, now that we are, quote, loosening all of it, the rules, what did you think? What do you think about all these people that are getting together in that kind of venue and partying? It's,
I mean, sadly inevitable to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy for me as a 47-year-old white dude, married, not white, but just 47-year-old married dude, to kind of look at these people and tisk and scold. But, you know, these are horny 20-somethings,
right,
who want to get laid, you know, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying it's predictable. It's especially predictable when there is mixed messaging coming from the top levels of the United States government.
Right.
You know, when there's at the very least plausible, like, even if you personally aren't sure whether you should be wearing a mask or not, if the president's saying screw it, and if all these elected officials are saying screw it, well, then screw it. You know?
Have you ever
They've given them green light.
Have you ever been to one of those types of resort pool parties as a young man?
Lord, no. I don't even like taking my shirt off. You crazy?
Christian Finnegan.
I would rather be pantsless than shirtless.
Thank you, as always, for joining me for another great conversation. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Pete.
All right. Christian Finnegan, everybody. I love him. And many of you do as well. Thank you very much for checking out today's episode. Thank you for your support with your paid subscription. Sorry I have to say that every time I talk, but part of what you got to do to promote the podcast and to make a living, you know. So I hope you have a great weekend if you're listening on Friday. I look forward to talking. I didn't talk to as many folks as I normally do, but next week I'm going to hopefully be doing a live conversation. Who do you want me to do it with? Who should I reach out to? Lots of good ideas coming my way, so keep them coming. standupwithpete@gmail.com. You can instant message me, rather direct message me. Does anybody instant message anymore? Is that a thing? On Twitter, on Instagram, and we'll talk. I look forward to it. Thanks for listening. Be the change you want to see in the world. Know that no matter what you are going through, you are not alone. And I love you. Wallace, you particularly. Wallace reached out to me and said he needed to hear that when I said it. Well, that one is specifically for you, brother. Talk to you soon.